Imagine a sun-scorched Mediterranean island during World War II, where young American airmen live under the constant hum of bomber engines and the lingering smell of sweat, fear, and irony. This is Pianosa, a small, seemingly idyllic speck off the coast of Italy. And it is here that Joseph Heller's Catch-22 unfolds, an upside-down world where logic twists into lunacy, rules tie themselves into knots, and men struggle to keep their sanity in the face of relentless absurdity. At the center of it all stands Captain John Yossarian, a bombardier in the U.S. Army Air Forces, who wants nothing more than to survive. His journey to preserve his own life amidst the relentless push for more bombing missions, baffling regulations, and the hollow speeches of self-important officers forms the heart of this extraordinary, darkly comedic, and profoundly unsettling tale. From the moment we meet Yossarian, we sense a man on the brink. He's holed up in the hospital, faking a mysterious liver ailment, something that's not quite jaundice, but could be if it's left to the imagination. He reasons, as so many in this environment do, that time in the hospital means time not flying dangerous missions over enemy territory. Yet even within the safe space of a hospital ward, the war's bizarre politics prevail. There's the Texan who won't stop talking about his love for America, and the pale soldier in white, who's completely swathed in bandages and inaccessible to any real human connection. Yossarian's feigned illness is a strategy, an attempt to preserve his existence amid the deadly game outside. But his respite is always temporary. Before long, he's back at the squadron, and the shadow of new missions looms. The military bureaucracy that governs Yossarian and his comrades is headed by officers like Colonel Cathcart and Colonel Korn. These men, obsessed with promotions, prestige, and personal glory, keep raising the number of missions the airmen must complete before going home. Each time the men approach the seemingly promised goal, first 25 missions, then 30, then 35, Cathcart callously increases the number again. Safety, rest, and the finish line recede like a mirage. This is the world of Catch-22, a reality where to ask for relief on grounds of insanity would prove one's sanity, thus making one ineligible for discharge. To be released from duty, a man must be crazy, but if he's sane enough to ask, he's not crazy at all. It's a dizzying, circular logic that traps Yossarian and everyone else in an unending cycle of danger. As Yossarian navigates these impossible rules, he's surrounded by a colorful, tragic, and sometimes grotesquely funny cast of characters. There's Yossarian's roommate, a cheerful tinkerer who's constantly working on bizarre little projects, or gets shot down repeatedly, yet always manages to survive and return. His odd behavior, stuffing crab apples in his cheeks and tinkering with his plane's engines, hints at something deeper. We will later realize that Orr's apparent eccentricities disguise a carefully laid plan for escape. There's also Dunbar, Yossarian's close friend, who tries to make time slow down by doing things he hates. If time passes slowly, he reasons he'll live longer. Dunbar embodies a quiet, but persistent existential rebellion. He's not as brash as Yossarian, nor as cunning, but he hopes to cheat death by stretching his days through sheer boredom. McWatt, on the other hand, is a pilot who sails through the sky with a serene smile and a mind floating somewhere above grim reality. Nately is a well-bred, earnest young man who falls tragically in love with a jaded Italian prostitute, a woman who is disinterested and increasingly impatient with his naive devotion. Nately's gentleness, his longing for love and stability in a time of chaos, makes his inevitable fate all the more heart-wrenching. Then there's Major, a man burdened with a ridiculous name and an accidental promotion, an introvert who yearns for anonymity and acceptance. Major finds himself placed in charge entirely by the whim of paperwork. He can't handle people's expectations, nor can he handle the absurd responsibilities thrust upon him. He retreats to his office and orders that he can only be seen when he's not there, an impossible condition that ensures he'll remain isolated. His predicament stands as a testament to how ridiculous military bureaucracies can become, turning human beings into absurd caricatures rather than rational actors. And how can we forget Milo Minderbinder, the mess officer turned entrepreneurial genius who builds a global black market syndicate known as M&M Enterprises. Milo's pursuit isn't national victory, but sheer profit, and he'll strike deals with the enemy if it fattens his bottom line. He arranges bombing missions for personal gain, trading in goods and services like a ringmaster of chaos. Milo's moral compass is as flexible as rubber, yet he insists that everyone has a share in his enterprise. This twisted logic mirrors the novel's central theme. What's good for the syndicate is good for everyone, no matter how monstrous the deal. Milo's involvement reaches a peak of monstrous absurdity when he contracts with the Germans to bomb his own base, as long as it's profitable. The bewildered men on Pianosa watch as their own planes rain destruction upon them, an ultimate betrayal camouflaged by a businessman's silver tongue. At the spiritual center of the novel stands the chaplain, timid and thoughtful, who feels increasingly alienated within the heartless machinery of the military. He wrestles with religious faith, moral obligations, and the creeping suspicion that nothing makes sense anymore. His is a quiet struggle. He tries to reason with his superiors, to offer comfort to the men, and to find meaning in the madness. Over time, the chaplain becomes more disillusioned as he witnesses injustices and the denial of basic humanity. He's also subjected to bizarre inquests by the authorities, who suspect him of forging documents or hiding seditious thoughts, accusations that highlight just how thoroughly paranoia and confusion rule the day. These are just some of the characters who dance through this absurd military carnival. Yet behind the comedic chaos lurks a darker truth. For Yossarian, the central trauma revolves around Snowden, a young airman who died horrifically during a mission. Snowden's death is a recurring phantom in the narrative, a memory that surfaces and recedes throughout the book until we finally see it in all its painful clarity. In that fateful scene, Yossarian tries to help the mortally wounded Snowden. At first, Yossarian thinks the injury is minor, just a torn piece of Snowden's flak jacket and a small wound on his leg. But when he opens Snowden's uniform, he's confronted with the ghastly reality of the young man's mortal wound, his entrails spilling out, his life irreversibly leaking away. It's a moment that cracks Yossarian's worldview. The neat divisions between allies and enemies, right and wrong, duty and self-preservation, are obliterated as he cradles a dying friend. Snowden's final lesson, whispered through the silence of that memory, is chillingly simple. Man was matter. This realization, that human life is fragile, that human beings are not divine heroes, but vulnerable sacks of flesh and bone, haunts Yossarian and propels his desperate quest to stay alive. While the novel leaps around in time, flashing back and forth, revisiting scenes from different angles, Yossarian's central conflict remains constant. He must survive a system designed to ignore his individuality and treat him as expendable. At every turn, Catch-22 blocks him, asks to be grounded because you're insane and you prove your sanity. Dare to dodge responsibility, and the bureaucracy finds a way to snare you. Yossarian watches men die pointlessly. McWhat accidentally kills Kid Samson by flying too low and slicing him in half of the propeller. Then McWhat himself commits suicide by crashing his plane into a mountain. Men vanish unexpectedly. Dunbar disappears. presumably disappeared by the authorities for being inconveniently sane, or at least inconveniently honest about the absurdity around him. Death and loss accumulate. Nately, who finally manages to win over his apathetic prostitute with gentle persistence, meets a sudden and senseless death on a mission shortly after his romantic victory. In the aftermath of Nately's death, the prostitute, now unmoored, blames Yossarian for everything. Her grief becomes rage, and she begins stalking Yossarian with a knife, trying to kill him at every unexpected moment. This surreal development underscores how little reason and stability remain in this war-torn existence. Her fury mirrors the madness of the larger world. Violence begets violence, and senseless death breeds senseless vengeance. As Yossarian's squadron continues its missions, the pressure mounts. Colonel Cathcart, desperate for promotion and praise, keeps demanding more heroism, more bravery, more flights into deadly enemy territory. Soldiers come and go, faces blur together, and Yossarian's anxiety intensifies. He's had enough. He refuses to fly more missions, an act of rebellion that shocks his superiors. The chaplain tries to help Yossarian, but to no avail. Ultimately, Yossarian's obstinacy leads Colonel Cathcart and Colonel Corn to propose a deal. They'll let him go home if he agrees to support their leadership publicly, to say nice things about them and praise their wisdom. It's a devil's bargain, a temptation that would spare his life but betray his fellow airmen. Yossarian, who has spent so long trying to outwit this system, is now forced to consider what it means to maintain integrity in a world gone mad. In a climactic moment of moral reckoning, Yossarian thinks about the cost of accepting such a deal. He remembers Snowden's death, the friends he's lost, the craven manipulations of Milo, Cathcart, Corn, and the military machine. Accepting the deal would mean selling out everyone still trapped there, everyone forced to keep flying those terrible missions. If he leaves by signing this sordid contract, the men will be stuck in the same cycle of mission counts rising and lives wasted. It would mean acknowledging that his life is more valuable than any sense of honor or solidarity with his comrades. Just when it seems he has no good choices, continue flying and likely die, or accept a corrupt offer and abandon his principles, Yossarian learns something that changes everything. He learns that his odd roommate who kept getting shot down and tinkering with his equipment did not die at all, or cleverly faked his incompetence so that he could crash land in a neutral zone and escape to Sweden. Sweden becomes a symbol of true freedom, a far-off land beyond the reach of military madness. Inspired by Orr's cunning, Yossarian realizes he can forge his own path. He doesn't need the colonel's deal. He can desert. He can literally run away from the absurd demands of Catch-22. At the novel's conclusion, Yossarian decides to flee, dodging the prostitute's knife-wielding fury once again in Rome. He chooses not to be complicit in Cathcart and Corn's schemes, not to endure the escalating missions. Instead, he will follow Orr's example, embracing uncertainty but also hope. His desertion is both a triumphant victory and a leap into the unknown. It's a personal rebellion against the moral vacuum of war, a final refusal to be treated as a piece of expendable matter. If we step back and look at the grand tapestry of Catch-22, we see that it's much more than a war story. Heller uses war as a stage for a larger existential comedy. The narrative shatters linear time, spinning us through a kaleidoscope of events that repeat, overlap, and echo each other. Scenes are revisited with new understanding. Jokes appear and reappear in sinister new lights, and contradictions pile up until the reader, like Yossarian, struggles to find a stable foothold. The themes woven through this labyrinth are potent. At the forefront, we have the absurdity of bureaucracy, the idea that impersonal rules and regulations have supplanted human compassion and reason. Catch-22 itself stands as a monument to nonsensical logic, the perfect bureaucratic rule that ensures no one can escape its grasp. The novel also takes a hard look at the dehumanization wrought by war. Soldiers become statistics, commodities to trade, pawns in a vast game that no one seems fully to understand. The moral compass spins wildly as characters profit from destruction, sell their souls for promotions, or simply vanish without a trace. Yet through it all, there is Yossarian's quiet assertion of individual freedom. His decision to walk away is a radical one, especially in a time where conformity could mean safety, or at least the illusion of it. Yossarian's journey from a fearful, self-preserving trickster feigning illness to a man who refuses to bargain away his integrity forms a subtle, stirring arc. While his initial motivation is pure survival, by the end, his survival is tied to moral choice. He won't be made complicit in the machine that grinds up young lives. He's seen too much, held Snowden's shattered body, witnessed his friends die senselessly, and recognized the utter hollowness of those in power. The atmosphere of Catch-22 is a weird blend of comedic zaniness and chilling horror. Pianosa is warm and beautiful in a superficial sense. The sun sets over calm waters, and locals in Rome continue their lives despite the war. But underneath the beauty lies the rot of a corrupted system. The officers lounge about planning how to look good to their superiors, while the enlisted men scramble to survive missions that seem to have no meaning. Bombs drop, deals are struck, and the lines between friend and foe blur. The world is simultaneously too real and surreal, a fever dream of war's contradictions. As a viewer of this summary, you're likely feeling a mixture of emotions: amusement at the outlandish antics, fury at the injustice, sorrow for the lost men, and admiration for Yossarian's final stand. That's precisely what Heller achieves in Catch-22, a disorienting, emotionally complex experience that mirrors the chaos of war itself. The novel refuses to offer simple heroes or clean resolutions. Instead, it gives us a universe where paradoxes rule, words twist back on themselves, and sanity can only be found by embracing one's own moral compass, no matter how hard it is to hold steady. What do we take away from this story? Perhaps the recognition that war is not just bravery and valor. It's often confusion, cruelty, and a grotesque negotiation with death. Perhaps we learn that authorities are not always wise or just, and that their rules can be tools of oppression, not order. The term Catch-22 has entered our everyday language precisely because it captures a timeless sense of entrapment, where the rules intended to help you twist into a mechanism to keep you helpless. And yet, in this tangled mess, there is still hope. The hope lies in personal rebellion, in the courage to refuse to play a game rigged against you. By the end, Yossarian's desertion is more than a physical escape. It's a moral and spiritual one. It's a gesture of faith in the possibility of another life, beyond the machine that treats men like cogs. It's a refusal to let the horror he's witnessed define him as either a coward or a pawn. Instead, he becomes the one who says no to madness and yes to the possibility of something better, even if he has to face unknown dangers to reach it. In conclusion, Catch-22 is an intricate tapestry of fear, laughter, tragedy, and subversive humor. It's a story that reveals its truths and layers, stepping in and out of time, and making readers and viewers complicit in its confusion until we, too, feel trapped and desperate. Yet out of this confusion emerges a singular act of resistance. Yossarian's final decision to flee, to break the cycle and seek freedom in an uncertain world, stands as the ultimate defiance against the Catch-22 that tried to define him. Through his journey, Joseph Heller challenges us to question authority, to see through the absurdities that govern our own lives, and to remember that sometimes the bravest act is simply to refuse to play by absurd rules.